Protected Speech with Ravi Kapur and Jonathan Choe.
Alongside Jonathan Choe, I'm Ravi Kapur for another edition of Protected Speech. We're going to get into first the topic that Jonathan's been covering extensively, the homeless crisis, but namely he's uncovered enormous spending taking place in King County, which is the home of Seattle. Jonathan, tell us what you've uncovered.
So what I ended up doing is that I did a deep dive into sort of the numbers, and it was just staggering to see that the KCRHA paid its providers last year alone more than $100 million to do outreach and provide services and so on and so forth. But there's now questions about the effectiveness. You're going to spend that much money, and what do you have to show for it? And on top of that, I found another document uh, essentially, showing the salaries of these executives and Dones made more than $40,000. So I think this is where the term homeless industrial complex comes from, too big to fail. So again, we're really talking about what's going on here and how this agency moves forward and what homeless outreach is going to look like in this region.
So, Jonathan, I mean, obviously, we know there's a lot of spending going on around the country, especially in major cities. Uh, a lot of the political leaders are touting the kind of spending they're doing to try to alleviate the crisis. What is new about this information in the sense that we have a sense that there is a lot of spending going on, but what was remarkable about this disclosure to you?
Well, it's being spent in the wrong ways because ultimately the strategy, which is failing, which is pretty much being used by all these, Democratic run cities, is the so called housing first strategy. Basically, it's to, in theory, get all the homeless into housing and then they can work on the problems like mental health issues and addiction and, so on and so forth. But the problem with that model is, first of all, you can't build your way out of this. You can't build housing fast enough. And number two, none of these, um, y- you know, I guess what's the right word? Solutions to address this crisis are required. For example, if you have a fentanyl addiction, you go into this, housing first, location. You're not required to get help. You only do it when you're ready. So it's just not working right now, and all this money is being poured into these, failing solutions, and now even more taxpayer dollars are being requested, and it's just not working. So the question people are asking now, finally, they're waking up and saying, it's not working. Why are we still going after these failed policies?
But is the alternative just having people on the street? I mean, what is the reality? I mean, if you're addicted and you may not have the ability to fully comprehend your own life, right? You're not fully conscious.
Yeah,
What
there's
do you
got
do
to
to
be a
help these people?
focus on recovery and requirements, and those are the two words that are just not being focused on right now. Today, President Biden and the White House just announced the White House plan to assist multiple cities, including Seattle, Chicago, San Francisco, with this homeless crisis because they're starting to realize it is a national epidemic right now. Yet even the Biden administration is doubling down on this housing first policy, and I'm on the front lines every day, and you know that here in Seattle. And I've been to places like San Francisco, LA, Portland, Chicago, New York, and I've seen this firsthand. And housing first is just not working. And the other piece that's not working is harm reduction, where they're basically now giving away on the taxpayers' dollars dime all of these needles and meth pipes. And I get it. Nobody wants to see anyone get a disease or overdose. But again, there are no requirements to actually get help into recovery.
Well, we're going to move to another topic here in another state. That's Montana, a state that we haven't really discussed much on this program, but they've just announced something that is not a huge surprise, but the fact that they're leading is perhaps a surprise here. Montana announced they're going to ban TikTok. Now, I know we've had a federal government initiative to ban TikTok on government devices, but this is a huge change, and it's obviously going to lead to a lot of scrutiny, I'm sure litigation. TikTok, obviously, the parent company has ties to China. The U.S.-China relationship certainly strained in light of COVID and any number of issues that we can discuss on this program. But the fact that it's now going into technology, I mean, we've had a lot of U.S.-China cooperation over the last few decades, but TikTok seems to be this sore spot for so many. But meanwhile, when you have government hearings, and they had a government hearing that we've covered here, where the TikTok CEO has basically said, look, we have a lot of folks in the United States that are being employed by TikTok, and all of this information uh, may be accessible globally, may be accessible to China, but a lot of things are here in the United States. So this debate rages on. I want to get your take on this, Jonathan, because uh, you know, it is software. It is people have free will choices. To use a phrase you like to use TikTok. It's just like Twitter or YouTube or anything else. Why should a government regulate a social media site?
Well, the problem is spying. That's the allegation that the parent company ByteDance, owner of TikTok, is compromised by the CCP. And there's already been evidence. A few Forbes journalists earlier this year uncovered that they were being tracked on their mobile devices via the TikTok app. So that's ultimately what kind of broke open the floodgates. It's also what's led to congressional hearings where the CEO showed up and testified again, adamantly denying that ByteDance and TikTok are spying on American citizens. But at this point, can we really trust China? I mean, what do you think? Why do you think this is happening?
Well, I mean, I don't think that. Here's the thing: we have had, as a country, a huge back and forth with China over the last. I mean, you go back to Nixon, really. So, really, over the last 50 years, the doors have been open. I mean, I was having a conversation with a gentleman the other day. We were at a restaurant, and he's like, "Take a look around you. All these products." He figured about 80% of the products at that restaurant were manufactured in China. So let's not just talk about software. Let's talk about everyday lives, the comforts that we have, all the stuff at Walmart, all the stuff at so many furniture stores and all these venues that we consume. We may not even be, we might be oblivious to the impact China has
Yeah,
had
well,
on
that
this
was the
country.
trade-off, right? Looking back, it was a Faustian deal as far as I'm concerned, because what we did was we wanted cheap goods, and at the cost of cheap labor, we turned the other eye at all the human rights, we turned a blind eye to all the human rights violations, and now China's taken all our intellectual property in the process as we're sending over all the designs and so on and so forth. And now China's rising as a superpower. So of course now America's concerned, and they should be. This is a big issue. I mean, my question to you is, your platform, your media platform, Diya TV, is on TikTok. Are you still going to use TikTok despite all these
I mean, I
concerns?
personally don't. I've almost entirely stayed off social media myself, just because I know.
Do you just
First
pay
of all,
people to use your TikTok?
it's a time suck for me personally, but for the company, I think we all, if you're in the media business, and we're going to talk to another media guy here in just a moment, Jesse Friedman. But if you're in the media business, you got to reach people where they are now. There's not one single funnel. We don't have a three-channel universe anymore.
But
We
is it
have
worth the trade-off on this? Are you going to stay on TikTok? That's my
I,
question.
I think certainly as a company, we need to go where people are. And I should mention one of the arguments being made in Washington is that when you have hundreds of millions, I mean, we're talking like 150 million Americans on the platform, you take that away from them, there's going to be repercussions, right? I mean, the politicians are scared of a backlash, right? That's another issue because people, political leaders, want to reach these consumers any way they can, whether it's whatever the platform is. If TikTok has that kind of mass adoption, they want to reach them there. So I think this is going to be continually debated, and we'll see if this leads to what I think will likely end up happening is because if there's this much pushback from government entities, there might be a forced sale, and you'll have to have American equity, so to speak, and the the ByteDance folks will end up cashing out. But I think that's maybe the logical conclusion. We had, remember, Oracle and the whole cloud-based piece that was done a few years ago under the Trump administration, where they kind of cut a deal for Oracle to host a lot of the cloud-based stuff that TikTok was doing. So I think you're going to see more of that, where a tried and true American companies are going to have to own, the majority of the equity of this company because it's so significant. Otherwise, we could see this company really face more significant challenges. Now we're going to turn to a completely different direction, but it is media related. We're going to now get joined here by Jesse Friedman, who's a beat writer for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Jonathan and I have not had the pleasure to talk about baseball or a whole lot of sports on this program, and the thing is, we both love sports, cover it a lot, have covered the NBA Finals over the years, among other things, even the Stanley Cup. But we're really glad to bring Jesse in, who's piped in from Arizona before a Diamondbacks game. Hey, Jesse, I'm glad you could make some time for us. This is a new media landscape. You work for a company called PHNX, a company that probably didn't exist, a decade ago, and yet the conversations in the sports media landscape are being led by a lot of social companies. We see the impact Jonathan's had in Seattle on changing the discourse. I mean, he's made a huge impact, largely by using his Twitter account. Tell me about your impression now covering sports on a day-to-day basis. There was always this kind of tried and true relationship between, say, the local newspaper and these professional sports teams. Uh, do they embrace you to the same degree that, let's say, in San Francisco, like the Chronicle and the 49ers, the Giants were kind of lock in step? Do you get that same kind of feel today as a new media guy?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it. You said we maybe weren't around a decade ago. We weren't around 3 years ago. In fact, PHNX launched in September of 2021, so we are very much the new kid in town here in Phoenix. But yeah, I would say as far as how we're perceived being, not a traditional radio station, not a blog. We're kind of something a little bit different than what you'll find out there in the media landscape. There are definitely certain, I think people just like casually in conversations, people ask me all the time, like, oh, so like you're on the radio, right? And I'm like, no, we're not on the radio. And then they ask, oh, so you're on TV then, right? Because you have video. And ironically, today, I guess that is actually the case. But normally it is not. Normally we're on YouTube, we're on social media, we're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And as you guys were talking about earlier with your conversation with TikTok, this is where people are, right? This is how you reach people in this day and age. And, the sports media world, I think in a lot of ways has been sort of resistant to that evolution, right? We have to be willing to adapt the way that we do our work to reach people where they're at today. And today, that's what that means. It means being on YouTube. It means being on social media. It means not necessarily feeling like you have to communicate using the ways that we always have, right? The mediums that we always have over the years. So yeah, I feel very fortunate to be a part of this, and excited to see where it goes for sure.
So, who's ultimately the audience, Jesse, at this point? We were talking about TikTok, and by all accounts in the data, I mean, you have like 60+% of teenagers in America on TikTok right now, right? So I know you guys ultimately want to get baseball fans, but are you trying to target the next generation of baseball fans? Because I know there's been a big debate about just this fragmented media environment, right? I mean, Major League Baseball and all the other leagues are competing now with esports, video gamers. So, who are you targeting and how are you doing that right now?
I've always been, very passionate about the sport of baseball myself. Just going to games growing up and whatnot. It's always been I love basketball and football, and the other sports have their place, but baseball is by far the best in my objective opinion. So yeah, it's always been a passion of mine to try to help this sport reach more people, and specifically young people, as you talked about. There's no question that younger crowds tend to gravitate a little bit more towards the NBA and the NFL here in the US. But Major League Baseball is hyper aware of that, right? That's why you're seeing things like the pitch clock. That's why you're seeing all of these different rule changes that are largely designed to make the game move more quickly, to make the game more engaging, more interesting for those younger audiences. So these are all things that I personally am passionate about. And, I feel like Major League Baseball has done a pretty good job to this point in incorporating some of those things into the game. And on the media side, it's our responsibility to follow suit, right? If we're trying to reach young people, particularly with the sport of baseball, you're not going to be able to do that, with radio, with TV, with a newspaper or just written content exclusively, right? That's not the way that people consume content nowadays. And if you want to grow a media entity, or if you want to grow a sport, you have to go where those people are. And we certainly feel like we're making some headway in that regard. There's a long way to go as far as the sport of baseball, reaching younger people more and more. But I think Major League Baseball has taken some good steps, and hopefully we're doing the same.
I think baseball it has, in particular, not completely embraced some of the new media to the degree, like say the NBA has. I know
Sure.
the NBA has been incredible at pushing out content. Obviously, I'm in the Bay Area, so I've seen the evolution of the Warriors going from basically a moribund franchise to perhaps maybe the most powerful franchise in all of global sport, which is incredible. But you get a catalyst like Steph Curry everything can change. Uh, Give us your perspective on like the impact you're having on the culture and the community in Phoenix. I mean, if you have discourse on PHNX, does that get to the team? Does that get to the community to the same degree, say, a local newspaper had 20 years ago?
We're different. We're absolutely different. And, every day our goal when we're in the clubhouse, when we're talking with fans, when we're engaging with players and whatnot, our goal is to make it clear that we're different. And part of that means still engaging in some of the older mediums of content creation as well. So, I'm a writer. I write stories that are 2,000 words long at times, which maybe that in itself feels like something that would engage young people, but you'd be surprised what you can do in all mediums when you're telling compelling stories, right? I think storytelling in itself, getting to know the players on a deeper personal level, is something that is absolutely timeless. That is always going to appeal to every audience, I think. But yeah, when we're out there talking with plans or talking with players and talking with people and whatnot, we like to have fun. We don't have the same guardrails that a lot of other media entities have, and I think that's a huge advantage for us. We're able to have fun conversations that maybe the radio station next door isn't allowed to have. We're allowed to go off the rails a little bit more than some of these other entities are, and I think we use that to our advantage. That those are the kinds of pieces of content that play well on social media. The bite-sized things, shorts here on YouTube have become really big. Reels on Instagram are obviously really big. Those bite-sized pieces of content are also, a huge part of what we do. And yeah, we like to have fun more than anything else. The Diamondbacks have a player named Lourdes Gurriel Jr., not necessarily internationally known, but he has purple hair. And so my co-host Derek Montilla dyed his hair purple after the Diamondbacks had an above 500 record in April, and it's sort of been the talk of everyone seemingly over the last few weeks. We've talked with Lourdes himself about it. He got a kick out of it, and we have some fun clips and whatnot of him talking with Derek about how he needs to add more volume to his purple hair and whatnot in order to really make it look the way it's supposed to. But these are just the kind of things that we like to do that are fun and engaging, and hopefully help us reach a different crowd than what Major League Baseball traditionally reaches.
Jesse, we're talking about new media and digital, but I feel like the new media and digital is here. It's not really new anymore. I mean, everything's going digital and social. I ask teenagers right now, where do they get most of their news? They're not saying the newspaper. They're not saying the radio. They're not saying the TV set. They're saying their iPhone, right? Their mobile device, and social media platforms. They're not even going to the .coms anymore or the websites. With
Yeah.
that said, you have a pretty impressive bio in the short time you've been doing this. You're now part of the Baseball Writers Association of America. I mean, that's a pretty prestigious group. I mean, that's considered old school legacy media. I mean, can I just apply and be a part of that tomorrow? Or I mean, tell me about how you kind of, got that, got into the club, so to speak. And at the same time, do they accept you in the sense where they see you as outsiders in some ways, right? I mean, tell me about that.
It's a good question. I mean, it goes back to what you guys asked initially about how we're kind of perceived by other people in the industry. That's an interesting one. As far as the process for becoming a member of the Baseball Writers Association of America, heavily depends on your outlet. It doesn't really depend all that much on you as a journalist, as much as I would love to take credit for that. It very much depends on the outlet that you work for and whether it's seen as a website that has journalistic integrity, that's not a fan website, that's producing real journalistic content, that has a lot of value. And yeah, for a while, we have a couple of sister companies, one in Denver called DNVR, one in Chicago called CHGO. Our company originally launched with DNVR out in Denver, and for a while they were not included in that group. The website was perceived a little bit differently. It was sort of cast aside as maybe being a little bit more of a blog, a little bit more of a fan site. And granted, like I said before, you're going to see things, on our website, in our shows that we do 5 days a week. You're going to see things that you won't see in other outlets. But you're also still going to see some really high quality journalism. And so for us, it's a matter of, not only do we want to have fun, not only do we want to go off the rails and do crazy things that you wouldn't see in other places. We also want to be really, really good at what we do as journalists. We want to have integrity. We want to tell stories that no one else has. We want to break news that no one else breaks. And I think the fact that we've been able to merge those two things together is what has allowed us to be well perceived in the industry.
Well, where does this go from here, Jesse? I mean, obviously, we put together this television show for a TV network that's airing on terrestrial linear TV, but we also made sure that it became a podcast to reach people throughout really the world now, and we're getting people all over the place to find this particular show. Where do you see this going with regard to PHNX and the overall company? I'm certainly intrigued by the model. Are you a threat to some of these sports networks? We heard about Bally Sports, their troubles in Phoenix. We actually had a conversation about Sinclair, which was part of this whole Diamond Sports
Right.
regime. Diamond Sports, they ended up basically splitting off and effectively writing off their investment. So Sinclair has taken a huge financial hit over their investment in Diamond Sports slash Bally's, and now there's a local TV station that has done a deal with the Phoenix Suns, and they're going to bring ostensibly Suns games back to over the air once they figure out the legal ramifications of winding up that Bally's deal. So talk about this sea change, because I think it's fascinating for someone like me who we've been creating different niches of content on free local TV, and now that seems to be coming back in earnest.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly friendly with our colleagues over at Bally Sports Arizona and Arizona Sports, the local radio station, the flagship home of the Diamondbacks, the Suns, the Cardinals, the Coyotes, all the local teams. But yeah, we do like to think, maybe selfishly, that we are a part of the future, a big part of the future, and kind of where this whole thing is headed in the long run. The reality is that things change quickly in this industry, as you both know. If you sign up to be a journalist, if you sign up to be a media personality, you're signing up to constantly evolve, right? And to constantly change how you do what you do in order to try to stay relevant and reach as many people as you possibly can. And yeah, we are seeing a lot of that already. Bally Sports Arizona, according to reports, have not made their rights payment to the Arizona Diamondbacks. So the Diamondbacks, as part of this whole bankruptcy process for Diamond Sports Group, have already lost a pretty significant amount of revenue. There's still certainly time for those things to be worked out, and there's bankruptcy hearings happening right now. Pretty ugly process overall. But the reality is that this is where things are headed. You're starting to see reports of ESPN starting their own direct to consumer streaming service. This is just kind of the way that things are headed overall. And yeah, in the long run, I think the biggest thing for Major League Baseball in particular is you want to make sure that people can watch these games. However this ends, you want to make sure that people can watch games, that hopefully more people can watch games than have ever been able to. Blackout restrictions have been a widespread critique of the sport for a long time. That's something that they need to find a way to work past. But it's clear that the way that that's going to happen, the way that people are going to watch these games, 10 years from now, maybe even 5 years from now, is going to look really different from the way that most people are watching these games right now. So our role is a little bit different. We're not necessarily in the business of streaming the sporting events directly to the consumer, but we're trying to be the sort of the next big thing as far as media companies, and kind of our role in helping fans really get plugged into their sports teams more so than they would find on the normal TV broadcast that they're watching every day. So yeah, we like to think that we're hopefully a big part of the future, and where this whole thing is headed. And I'm sure we're going to have to evolve ourselves here in the coming years as things continue to change.
Well, Jesse, I'm really glad. Actually, before we let you go, I'm glad you brought up the ESPN going to direct streaming to consumers. That's a huge sea change in news that just dropped. I mean, you could anticipate that they'd have to do that, given that is literally perhaps the channel that's keeping the cable bundle together. But if you can get ESPN individually, and I think I saw some numbers today that they're charging the cable operators roughly about $10 a month for ESPN programming. So you pull out ESPN, You see CNN's numbers are down. You see Fox News going through a transformation. MSNBC's lost some of their core personalities. A lot of these people are pivoting to their own podcasts, their own online platforms, kind of individuals, personality based programming. So there's going to be a lot of talented people out there that are creating their own forums, like you guys have there in Phoenix, and like Choe and I have done as individuals and collectively. So it's a heck of a time and a heck of an opportunity for all of us. And I think that's why we like having these discussions with people that are on the cutting edge. And before I let you go, I got to ask Madison Bumgarner, one of my favorites, got us 3 championships in San Francisco. He's going to get a statue probably out here. His career in Arizona didn't really wrap up in great terms. I mean, is he a Hall of Famer to you, or just not enough long-term dominance to get in the Hall of Fame?
Well, he might have a statue in San Francisco, but he's certainly not going to have one in Arizona. I can tell you that right now. Madison Bumgarner's career here in Arizona was really unfortunate. I mean, it got to the point for the D-backs where they just couldn't afford to run him out there every fifth day. They have aspirations of contending this season, and they just didn't have the time to keep running him out there. It is unfortunate because he was such a legend in San Francisco, like you said, just right at the center of those World Series runs. So as far as the Hall of Fame question goes, I gotta say I don't quite think Madison Bumgarner is there. I think his peak was impressive, and obviously the playoff resume is probably the most compelling thing that will probably get him some votes. But when it's all said and done, I just think he probably needed to age better in order for the full body of work to be Hall of Fame worthy. But that doesn't take the 3 World Series rings away from San Francisco Giants fans, and he was certainly right in the center of that. And I'm sure Giants fans will remember what he did for forever.
And I'll be upset if I don't ask you this. So Barry Bonds, I saw that man play. Best hitter I've ever seen. The baseball writers have kept him off out of the Hall of Fame for
Let's add
reasons
Roger Clemens
beyond
to
me.
the mix. Come on, let's talk Roger
Yeah, I
Clemens.
mean,
Come on,
you
the
can
Red
talk
Sox.
about Clemens. I mean, Clemens was fine. I mean, I think you can make more debates about Clemens. He was really good, but he started to tail off. Bonds was a Hall of Famer before allegations of taking steroids. Give me your thoughts, because you're a younger guy now with this fraternity of older baseball writers. I happen to get met. One of my English teachers was Sue Coppett, who was Leonard Coppett's wife. Leonard Coppett being a legendary baseball writer here in the Bay Area. Your thoughts now on the evolution of a younger guy like you as part of this fraternity that's voting on Hall of Famers. Does Bonds get in at some point?
Does he get in at some point? I don't know. Probably not. Would he have my vote? Absolutely. He would have my vote. To your guys' point earlier, that was an era of baseball where Barry Bonds wasn't the only one, right? And frankly, there are other guys that, may have already been elected to the Hall of Fame who were, part of that group and were just never discovered. So I think you have to consider the era. You have to consider the context that Barry Bonds was in. And like you said earlier, he was on a Hall of Fame trajectory, even if none of this stuff had ever happened. So, I understand there are clauses in, what it takes to become a Hall of Famer as far as how that's defined. There are statements in there about player character and, being a person of integrity and whatnot. So I understand where people are coming from, but when you consider the context and just where baseball was at in the era that is now known as the steroid era, there's no question in my mind that Barry Bonds should be part of that group.
Well, Jesse, we really appreciate your time. Jesse's a beat writer for the Arizona Diamondbacks for PHNX. Check out his work on all these digital platforms. We really appreciate it. We'll talk more baseball. Maybe my Giants can get their act in gear, and Jonathan's Red Sox
The Red
will be
Sox.
more productive.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Jesse. All right, let's roll on. Another topic another topic we cover on a regular basis is the budding U.S.-India relationship. India is kind of that hedge against the dominance of China over the last 30 years, and certainly from a national security standpoint, when we talk about a TikTok ban, certainly India is in the mix just from a population standpoint. Now the biggest population in the world, and India looking to make shore up their border as well. They have this Quad alliance between Australia and the United States, and India going on. And Prime Minister Modi is coming now to Washington in late June. I heard rumors that he may make a pit stop in New York as well. But the primary activity he's going to have is to spend some time with the Biden administration and spend time at the White House. There's a couple of things that are interesting to point out. So Eric Garcetti got iced for a couple of years. Garcetti was the nominee for ambassador to India, and basically he was held off. Like the Senate just froze him out for 2 years. He finally got confirmed a couple of months ago, and so he's making the rounds, doing a sprint around India, doing your standard kind of PR tour, talking to Bollywood stars, visiting different. The victims of the 26/11 terror attacks. He went there to pay respect. So he's doing that whole gamut. But a lot of folks are wondering, Garcetti's role in going to India, because the Biden administration, if you read between the lines between what is said and what the activity is, while there's a lot of activity between the U.S. and India, when they talk to the political left, human rights is that buzzword that's always used. I mean, it continues to come up. Even though the U.S. doesn't get challenged on their human rights, it always seems to be a buzzword between the U.S. and India. And I'm fascinated by that dichotomy, because India is so important for the United States moving forward. And once again, I think this is going to be a topic of discussion between Biden and Modi when they sit down together.
So, what do you think are the human rights violations in America that should be
Well,
highlighted?
I mean, look, Jonathan, we cover it on this show. I mean, I think we can pick apart all kinds of countries. And I think that's where I think, we've talked about kind of the virtue signaling that takes place. A lot of it's online, a lot of it's by political elites. And I think to use an Elon Musk term, the laptop class, right? We have a laptop class that is passing judgment on all kinds of countries and the way they do business. And I think for all the pressure that India gets, and again, I've spent some time there, um, you know, some of the rumor mongering that goes on. I mean, I don't see it on the ground, but maybe I'm just isolated and I'm in a bubble. So I'm not going to say my experience of going to India is the end all be all, but I just find it fascinating that you see really hateful rhetoric. You see, a political analysis that just doesn't seem valid. And so that's why I'm wondering, again, very diverse country, all these languages, all these people, 1.4 billion people, you have all these opinions. It's a democracy. There's definite challenges, but I mean, we see challenges right here in the United States. Whether what you're seeing in Seattle, what we've both seen in Chicago, what we
I
see.
mean, you
I
brought it
lived in.
up, so be specific. You're like not answering the question. What are the
No, no,
human
no. I
rights
mean,
violations? Just
Jonathan,
name it.
listen.
You don't
We
have to
we
give an
have a
explanation. Just name it.
we have an enormous homeless crisis. We have an
Okay.
enormous drug crisis.
Yep.
We have we basically have an undereducated population. Why do you think the immigration situation is what it is? We have a whole bunch of Americans in this country that are not getting the skills training they need to move forward. With AI coming out, do you think that it's going to matter whether you're Indian or Chinese or American moving forward? The AI is going to leap all of us intellectually, and we have to be in creative fields. Otherwise, we may not. None of us may have jobs. The basic tasks are going to become robotic, right? So I think we need to have these hard discussions. And I don't know if the
You're
political
spot on,
leadership has
man.
the will.
I don't. I wish I could disagree with you, but everything you just said, that is the inconvenient truth in America. We have this massive homeless crisis. We have this drug addiction crisis. Our borders are porous, and we're not talking about that. We're talking about everything else. And now India's human rights violations? What about our backyard? I don't know.
We have a lot of challenges, and I think I would like to see more leadership at the local level, and we're hoping to get some people that are trying to alleviate the public safety issues, the homeless issues that we've seen firsthand. The folks on the ground, we need to talk to political leadership that really understand it, because a lot of these people have skirted the issue during the COVID period, and I think it's very clear it needs to be addressed, and mental health being another aspect that is not being addressed. So again, I'm fascinated to see where the U.S. India relationship grows. I think both countries realize the need that they need to work together more closely. But some of the criticism, some of the pot shots, that's another interesting aspect. And I should mention, ahead of Modi's visit, his kind of chief opposition, Rahul Gandhi, of the Congress Party will be making his own tour of the United States, giving speeches. And in fact, he'll be giving a speech at Stanford University. And I believe he's doing an event at Madison Square Garden as well for about 5,000 people. So we'll be watching the Rahul Gandhi visit as well as the Modi visit, and to see how things evolve. And of course, India has an enormous national election coming up next year as well. So
So who are
between
these
the U.S. and
voices
India.
ultimately criticizing India? You keep on talking about these forces that bring up these, issues with India. Who are these people?
Well, let me get into the next topic, and we'll talk about that. And this is all kind of intertwined. And we're going to talk about this conversation now that Elon Musk had with CNBC. Now, Elon Musk has been making the rounds in recent weeks, having conversations with different media outlets, podcasters. But he did a sit down with David Faber from CNBC, and I thought what was interesting is, he basically has gone on Twitter now that he's the owner of Twitter, and he just calls things out. And I think the average billionaire, if you want to call a billionaire average, is not going out there to take pot shots at the left and the right. They're not out there putting their personal opinions on anything, the homeless crisis, public safety, whatever the topic is. They may, I mean, even it might be risque to say, hey, go Warriors, beat the Lakers, or whatever it is, because people don't want to upset the base or the constituents. But Elon Musk has gone out of his way to stick to make his opinion known on any number of topics. And one of the guys he talked about is George Soros. And Soros is a billionaire, and he's actually used his cash to influence policy, and not just in the United States, but globally. But Musk has taken some shots on Twitter, and David Faber asked him about that. We'll play this real quick clip here. David Faber and Elon Musk.
Do your tweets hurt the company? Are there Tesla owners who say, I don't agree with his political position because, and I know it because he shares so much of it? Or are there advertisers on Twitter that Linda Yaccarino will come and say, you got to stop, man, or, I can't get these ads because of some of the things you tweet?
I'm reminded of there's a scene in The Princess Bride. Great movie.
Great movie.
Where he confronts the person who killed his father. And he says, offer me money. Offer me power. I don't care.
So you just don't care. You want to share what you have to say.
I'll say what I want to say, and if the consequence of that is losing money, so be it.
So I think my takeaway from the Musk conversation with Faber is that he does not mind losing money if for using his voice, and which I think is really rare. Free speech, part of the reason we have this show is to be able to speak out and shine a light on certain topics. And I do think a lot of people are offended by what Musk does, and at the same time, I think it's important that we have people that are willing to speak their mind on whatever the issue is. And yes, he's going to lose some business from it. He's going to offend the sensibilities of the class of folks that are out there putting out brand safe content, making sure that advertisers are protected and not around negativity. It's going to impact the Twitter business, no question. And certainly he's lost a lot of support from his base of Tesla supporters, which are generally kind of left-leaning people. And, some of his political viewpoints would be considered conservative to many. So I think Elon is a fascinating figure for many reasons, but the fact that he basically said he doesn't care if he loses some money, I think is a really different perspective than other people of his ilk.
Yeah, and when you have that much money, what's another few billion, when you are worth nearly 200 billion. Again, Elon at one point was the wealthiest man in the world, but I think he's now down to number 2 or 3. So boo-hoo. But yeah, and I think to have that type of freedom, we talk about all the time, right? It's that FU money. And I think Elon Musk has FU money. And I think he's exercising and showing his sensibilities and his ideology and his values. And look, I say that also as a journalist. At the end of the day, we're all human beings, and we have a bias, we have a worldview, we have our own value system. And we do our best every single day to, fairly and, accurately portray a story and to be as objective as possible. And that means, challenging, opinions and fact checking and also getting different perspectives and sides in the mix. So, at the end of the day, again, if we're doing that to the best of our ability, I think as journalists, we're doing our job. Whereas someone like an Elon Musk, I think he's gone above and beyond, really. And I think his playbook, I respect a lot because while he can afford to lose business, at the same time, he really doesn't have to express his opinion. He could just quietly be behind the scenes and he could be stacking billions more. But, after a certain point, you're like, how much more money do you need, right? Versus influencing and making an impact, whatever that means for Elon or the George Soroses of the world. But I'm just glad that there are other voices beyond just, you know, the status quo billionaires. Because I don't think Elon is a status quo billionaire. I think he's challenging the establishment in many ways. And now he has arguably one of the most powerful media platforms in the world in Twitter, and he's got the money behind that as well. And of course, now Twitter has a new CEO, which has also come under scrutiny for her ties not only to the World Economic Forum but to legacy media at NBC. She was an NBC executive, and people are now wondering, what is she going to do? Is she going to turn Twitter quote unquote corporate? Will it be kind of the free flowing conversation and freedom of speech platform that Elon Musk wants and touts? So I think we're going to have to wait and see.
Right. Well, I think there's an economic reality for Twitter. You don't spend $44 billion on a company that only generates X millions with subscribers. They need to have advertising. They lost a lot of advertising. Yacarino, from all accounts, is maybe the best in the business. Running that book for NBC Universal is no joke. So she knows all the players, and she's going to try to build that business. And Elon can focus on product and go back to Tesla and SpaceX and all the things that he's doing. But
Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting time where we've had kind of quiet, billionaires, Soros being among them, who have kind of global influence. Another guy we've been covering to a small degree, Pierre Omidyar, the former eBay, executive. He was a founder of eBay. He has a lot of political influence globally, and this is going back to the U.S. and India. These ties, there are people that are trying to put their foot on the scale, so to speak, and influencing these two democracies because they can through their political speech is spending their cash. And so I think this is why we have to have these conversations to see, okay, who are the forces out there trying to shape public policy globally, and to call out Soros. That's a lot of people would not have done that, and so I think it's a really interesting time to see how Twitter evolves as a platform. Let's get into our weekly episode on AAPI hate, presented by the California State Library. Another horrific episode. Just I mean, honestly, Jonathan, we used to see racial epithets. We've both dealt with it ourselves, but now, obviously, with this online forums, you're seeing people doing all kinds of hateful, spiteful things in online venues, and really not even think about it.
Yeah, well, the good news is that no one got beat up or spit on. But unfortunately, we've all seen this viral video now. A Korean girl based in Los Angeles was, on one of these sites where you randomly just connect with people online through video chats. And she had randomly been connected with two white girls based in Texas, based in Dallas, and the white girls are heard saying, hey, we don't want to talk to you. And the Korean girl is trying to speak Spanish and just trying to have fun and seems lighthearted. And then the conversation quickly gets nasty. I mean, these two white girls turn into mean girls and start doing the Asian slant eye gesture, or pulling back their eyelids, the size of their eyes. And it's just like, what is going on here? Now, obviously, this Korean girl was smart enough to record it, and then she put it on TikTok, and then, it got picked up pretty much everywhere. But anyway, in 2023, these incidents of that's Asian hate, even though no one got beat up, but just to see this happening to this poor Korean girl, these white girls obviously owe her an apology.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, a lot of these things have happened historically in isolation, right? Whatever, uh, racial episodes that people of color have been dealing with. there usually aren't high definition cameras on standby or Instagram live
Or
rolling, but
iPhones,
now
yeah.
yeah, now everything is out there, and so while we think, okay, wow, there's this huge spate of hate crimes that are going on, a lot of the things have been happening historically. They just haven't been documented, and so at least we have now at least some technology to kind of demonstrate what's going on. But again, another
And the platforms
situation.
to talk about it and bring it to light, right? I mean, that's what's really important as well, to call this out and say it's wrong, but also hopefully to figure out how to prevent situations like this from happening again.
Absolutely. Well, for Jonathan Choe, I'm Ravi Kapur. That's been another edition of Protected Speech. We'll see you next time.